What y'all can do?
On the evening of September 8, 2017, 19-year-old Kenneka Jenkins left her home on Chicago's West Side to spend time with friends. It wasn't supposed to be anything unusual, just another Friday night. The weekend had finally arrived, and like many young people her age, Kenneka was looking forward to relaxing, having fun, and getting out of the house for a few hours. Friends later said she seemed normal that evening. There were no signs that anything was wrong. No indication that the night would end in tragedy. As the evening continued, Kenneka and several friends made their way to the Crowne Plaza Hotel in Rosemont, Illinois, just outside Chicago. The hotel was busy that night. Guests were checking in and out. Events were taking place. People moved through the hallways without giving much thought to the strangers around them. Inside one of the hotel rooms, a gathering was underway. Music played, people talked, laughed, and socialized. To everyone there, it seemed like a typical hotel party. Nothing about it appeared destined to become national news. But sometime during the early morning hours of September 9th, things began to change. Exactly what happened inside the hotel room that night has been debated for years. Witness accounts differed, memories were inconsistent, and investigators would later spend countless hours trying to piece together a reliable timeline. What everyone agrees on is this. At some point, Kenneka became separated from the people she arrived with. At first, it didn't seem like a major problem. Large groups often split up at parties. People move from room to room. They step out into hallways. They visit friends. It happens all the time. They step out into hallways. They visit friends. It happens all the time. But as the minutes passed, Kenneka remained missing. Calls to her phone went unanswered. Friends began looking around the hotel. They checked nearby areas and asked questions. Still, nobody could find her. What started as confusion slowly turned into concern, and concern soon became panic. Meanwhile, Kenneka's family was beginning to hear that something wasn't right. Her mother, Teresa Martin, would later describe the growing fears she felt as information started coming in. The details were unclear, the answers were few, but one thing was becoming obvious. Nobody knew where Kenneka was. As the search continued, frustration grew. Family members wanted help. They wanted answers, and they wanted the hotel to take the situation seriously. Hours were passing. A 19-year-old woman had disappeared inside or around a large hotel. Yet no one seemed able to explain what had happened. What nobody realized at the time was that the answer was already somewhere inside the building. Hidden within hundreds of rooms, hallways, service corridors, and security camera recordings. The search for Kenneka Jenkins was about to become something much bigger than a missing person case. And within hours, the discovery that followed would shock Chicago and eventually the entire country. The answer was inside the building the entire time. As the hours passed, Kenneka Jenkins was still missing. What had started as concern was quickly becoming fear. Friends continued searching throughout the hotel, hoping she would suddenly appear. They called her phone again and again. Nothing, no answer. No sign of where she had gone. Meanwhile, Kenneka's mother, Teresa Martin, was becoming increasingly desperate for answers. After learning that her daughter could not be found, she rushed to the Crowne Plaza Hotel. By then, several hours had already passed. For Teresa, every minute felt like an eternity. She believed something was seriously wrong. But finding answers would prove difficult. According to reports, tensions quickly developed between family members and hotel staff. The family wanted immediate access to surveillance footage and a more aggressive search effort. Hotel employees explained that certain procedures had to be followed. As frustration grew, emotions ran high. Nobody seemed to know where Kenneka was. And nobody could explain how a 19-year-old woman had seemingly vanished inside a large hotel. Eventually, authorities became involved. Investigators began reviewing surveillance footage from throughout the property. The hotel contained dozens of cameras positioned in hallways, elevators, and common areas. Somewhere within those recordings, they hoped to find clues. Then they saw something. Security footage appeared to show Kenneka walking alone through the hotel during the early morning hours. The images were unsettling. She appeared disoriented. At times, she seemed to struggle to maintain her balance. She moved through hallways, around corners, and into areas rarely seen by guests. For investigators, the footage provided the first real glimpse into her final known movements. But it also raised new questions. Why was she alone? Where was she trying to go? And why had nobody stopped to help her? As the search continued, investigators followed the path shown in the surveillance videos. Eventually, attention turned toward an area of the hotel that most guests never entered, a section used primarily by staff. Hours after Kenneka had first been reported missing, the search came to a devastating end. Her body was discovered inside a walk-in freezer in a vacant kitchen area of the hotel. The news shocked her family, it shocked investigators, and it would soon shock the entire country. Almost immediately, questions began to emerge. How had she ended up there? Why wasn't she found sooner? Could someone have been involved, or had a tragic accident occurred? As word spread across social media, millions of people became invested in finding answers. The case was no longer just a local tragedy, it was becoming a national story. And the debate surrounding what happened to Kenneka Jenkins was only beginning. The case was no longer just a local tragedy, it was becoming a national story. Following the discovery of Kenneka Jenkins inside the hotel freezer, investigators faced intense pressure to determine exactly what had happened. The case had already attracted widespread attention. Now the public wanted answers. Detectives began reviewing surveillance footage, witness statements, and physical evidence collected from the hotel. The videos became a major focus of the investigation. Footage appeared to show Kenneka moving alone through various parts of the hotel during the early morning hours. She walked through hallways, entered service areas, and eventually disappeared from view. For many viewers, the footage was difficult to watch. She appeared disoriented and unsteady. Investigators worked to reconstruct her movements minute by minute. At the same time, the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office conducted an autopsy. The goal was to determine both the cause and manner of death. When the findings were eventually released, officials concluded that Kenneka's death was accidental. According to the medical examiner, hypothermia was identified as the cause of death. Toxicology results also indicated the presence of alcohol and medication in her system. For investigators, the findings supported the theory that Kenneka had entered the freezer on her own and was unable to get out. But for many people following the case, the official explanation did not answer every question. Social media quickly became flooded with discussions, theories, and speculation. Millions of people watched the surveillance videos. Many replayed the footage repeatedly, searching for details they believed investigators had missed. Some questioned whether Kenneka had truly been alone. Others wondered if additional people had been involved. Online forums, YouTube videos, and social media posts generated countless theories. As the case continued gaining attention, investigators repeatedly stated that they had found no evidence supporting claims of foul play. Still, public debate continued. Part of the reason was the emotional nature of the case itself. A young woman had gone to a party with friends and never returned home. For many people, accepting that such a tragedy could occur without criminal involvement was difficult. The release of surveillance footage only intensified those feelings. Every frame was analyzed, every movement was discussed, every unanswered question fueled another round of speculation. Meanwhile, Kenneka's family continued seeking answers and advocating for their daughter. Their grief was now unfolding in front of a national audience. As months passed, the investigation remained one of the most talked about cases on social media. But while theories continued to spread online, officials maintained that the evidence supported their conclusions. The divide between the official findings and public opinion would become one of the defining features of the entire case. And that debate continues even today. The divide between the official findings and public opinion would become one of the defining features of the entire case. By the end of 2017, the name Kenneka Jenkins was known across the United States. What had started as a missing person case inside a hotel had evolved into one of the most discussed true crime stories on the internet. Millions of people had watched the surveillance footage. Millions more had debated what happened during Kenneka's final hours. And yet, years later, the case continues to generate discussion. Part of the reason is that the story touches on a fear many people can relate to. A young woman went out with friends for what should have been an ordinary night. She never made it home. That reality alone was enough to capture national attention. As time passed, investigators stood by their findings. They maintained that the evidence supported the conclusion that Kenneka's death was a tragic accident. No criminal charges were filed, no suspects were identified, and no evidence was presented that changed the official ruling. But despite those conclusions, public debate never completely disappeared. Social media allowed the case to take on a life of its own. Videos, theories, and discussions continued to circulate long after the investigation had ended. For some people, questions remained. For others, the available evidence provided a clear explanation. What everyone could agree on, however, was the heartbreaking loss suffered by Kenneka's family. Behind every headline, every theory, and every online debate was a real person. A daughter, a friend, a young woman whose life ended far too soon. Today, the case of Kenneka Jenkins remains one of the most talked about mysteries of the social media era. Not because everyone agrees on what happened, but because it demonstrated how quickly a tragedy can spread across the internet and become part of a much larger conversation. Years later, people are still asking questions, still revisiting the footage, still discussing the events of that night. And perhaps that is why the story continues to endure. Not because every question has been answered, but because the memory of Kenneka Jenkins has never been forgotten. Thank you for watching Crime Untold. If you found this documentary informative, consider subscribing for more true crime stories, mysteries, and investigations. And as always, let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you believe happened during Kenneka Jenkins' final hours?